returning home from deployment to surprise my family, but my mom found out and tried to stay at our small apartment. So I told her off for wanting to invade our space. Hey, everyone, I am a 21-year-old guy who's been deployed for the past 10 months, and guess what? I'm finally coming home in a week. My wife and I had this awesome plan where she'd be the only one to know my exact return date so we could totally surprise our family and friends. A couple of weeks ago, my wife, who's also 21, went back home for a family event. During her visit, she spent a day with my mom and my two younger sisters. Now, here's the deal. My mom absolutely hates surprises. Like, if I showed up unannounced, she'd probably be furious. My wife and I figured we'd have to tell my mom eventually because of that. But we wanted to wait until the last minute since my mom has a tendency to spill the beans to my sisters. While my wife was at home, my mom kept nagging her, saying she wouldn't talk to her, let the girls go places, or take days off work unless she knew when I'd be back. So my wife gave her a rough estimate, like a week range when I might be home. Fast forward to today, my mom texted me saying she's planning to be there when my plane lands. I was like, did you clear this with my wife? Because apparently, she's planning to stay in our one-bedroom apartment, and she hadn't even asked my wife. Turns out she hasn't told my sisters either. Now, my mom has pulled some stunts before that have created tension between my wife and me, so I kind of lost it. I told her I wasn't going to give her my exact flight date and that if I wanted her there, I'd want my sisters there too. She went off about being a single mom who raised me, saying I should want to see her first. That's when I told her straight up that I didn't want her in my house when I first get back. I'm a grown, married man, and I want to be with my wife first. She kept pushing, saying she's been there for me since, forever, while my wife's only been around for a few years, and even started trash-talking my wife, saying she doesn't have a real job and doesn't contribute. For the record, my wife is a nanny while she's in school and she makes good money, so she definitely contributes. I told my mom I was done with the badgering and wanted to come home to my wife and our pets, have some alone time, and yes, be intimate wherever and whenever, since we haven't seen each other in so long. My mom broke down crying and has been sending me long texts about how I've changed, how I only care about my own pleasure, and saying I'm using my wife. I haven't responded to her messages yet, but I'm considering it based on advice I might get. Some people have suggested I tell my mom to stop acting immature and stop trashing my wife if she wants to communicate with me. Honestly, I think I need to go low or no contact for a while. This isn't the first time my mom's overstepped. During basic training, she called the base so many times they had to pull me from intake to tell her to stop. She doesn't even know my full MOS, which is kind of a relief. Some folks have suggested telling my CO and XO about her to avoid her, trying to get info on my return. It's embarrassing, but probably a good idea to protect myself. Her behavior really kicked in after I got married. When my wife was just my girlfriend, my mom was super cool with her and always joking about how great we were together. Now, she seems bothered when we spend time together without inviting her. It's like she's jealous or something and can't grasp that. I'm an adult now. I've tried pulling back communication and just focusing on my sisters, but this latest situation forced me to step in. I wasn't about to let her think she could just show up without checking with my wife first, especially since my wife is the one holding down the fort while I'm away. If anyone has dealt with something similar, I'd love some advice on how to navigate this. Do you think my mom would respond better if my wife talked to her? I kind of doubt it, though. So, here's the deal with my mom. She basically told my wife that she wouldn't talk to her or let my sister hang out with us if my wife didn't spill the beans on when I'd be visiting home. I'm pretty sure if my wife told her she wasn't welcome, things would get pretty ugly, if not worse. Plus, my wife is the ultimate people pleaser. Like, she's super sweet and would literally go out of her way to make anyone happy, even if it's not what she wants. She's getting better at standing up for herself, but I really don't want to put her in a tough spot. Now, if my mom ever approached my wife for something, I'd want her to stand up for herself, but I hate the idea of asking her to do that on my behalf. One of the commenters was like, OMG, you need to go no contact or very low contact with your mom. Seriously, like, wow, that's just crazy. When I got back from deployment, my mom was the last thing on my mind, and God forbid if I got stationed overseas, what would she do then? Move in with us? We definitely need to shut this down now. I've already limited contact with her a lot, mostly just for my sister's sake. My wife doesn't talk to her much either. Our plan once my current assignment is up, is to move even further away, maybe somewhere we'd have to fly to visit. That would cut down our visits big time because traveling with our pets is a hassle. They're both large dogs, and we don't want to put them in the cargo hold. Plus, plane tickets and pet boarding get expensive. If people want to see us, they'll have to come to us. Oh, and Mom refuses to get on a plane. So there's that. One commenter said, "I'm not the asshole here because my mom is way too involved in my life." Has she always been this clingy? Yeah, pretty much. Looking back, ever since my dad died, I kind of became her stand-in. She practically expected me to step up as a father figure to my sisters starting when I was just 8 years old. Even now, I've blocked her calls because whenever my sisters are in trouble, she calls me to sort it out instead of handling it herself. So, here's an update. Since some people wanted to stay in the loop. It's not great news, though. Thanks to another wife sharing our flight date all over Facebook, our return got pushed back by a whole month. I managed to call my wife, and we're both pretty devastated. I only had time for one call, so I asked her to let everyone know, including my mom. Yep, I know. Some people might not be happy about that, but my wife just told her I wouldn't be back until later. My mom's reaction was unbelievable. She texted back, "Oh, that's great. It's actually better timing for me." My wife clapped back, telling her how selfish that was, especially since I've been dying to get home. After that, my wife actually blocked my mom. Her shiny spine is really showing now. I haven't reached out to my mom, and I don't plan to. I won't block her completely, because my sisters are still minors, and I want to keep some line of communication open in case of emergencies. But I'm done texting or calling her unless it's absolutely necessary. Some backstory for more context. My dad passed away when I was 6, and since then, my mom kind of leaned on me to help raise my sisters. It didn't stop, even when they were teenagers. When I joined the military, my mom freaked out, saying she didn't know how she'd handle the house without me. She even wanted to send my sisters to stay with us in turns, expecting us to buy a hide-a-bed couch for them to crash on. Obviously, that never happened. I told her no way, it wasn't my job to raise my sisters. Growing up, my mom and I were really close. I considered her one of my best friends. But after I got married, I started seeing things differently. Some stuff she did wasn't cool. For example, she started buying me condoms when I was just 12. She was super open about sex and didn't care that I was having sex at such a young age. This led to me being a bit of a player before I met my wife. I used to sneak girls in and out all the time. My wife was the first girl I introduced to my family during the day and invited over for dinner. She has pretty strict views on sex, and when we started dating, even though she knew I was a bit of a player, she wanted to wait until we were more serious. We still hung out, secretly, but we'd just play Mario Kart, watch movies, and chill all night. When I changed my ways for her, it somehow changed my mom's attitude towards me. End of the story, things have been complicated, but we're trying to figure it out one step at a time. So back in high school, my mom used to be really nosy about the girls I was hooking up with. But when I started dating my now wife, she would ask about our relationship, and I'd tell her we weren't doing anything sexual. She thought I was lying and got upset, so she stopped buying me condoms. I was cool with it, since I didn't need them at first, and by the time I did, I was 18 and could get them myself. Before my wife and I did the deed, my mom would storm into my room, shouting that she didn't want me having sex under her roof. I thought she had realized how wrong it was to push a minor into having sex. My mom actually liked my wife back when she was just my girlfriend. It always puzzled me because she went from loving her and inviting her to everything to trash-talking her suddenly. People on my last post explained that it was because my wife became permanent. Mom didn't like that. My mom has happily blocked me since we got married. She even freaked out when I kissed my wife at our wedding, and she begged us to sleep on a pallet in her living room on our wedding night. We definitely didn't. When we first moved, she called 3 times a day, once when I usually got off work, again during or after dinner, and once at night. Sometimes she called while my wife and I were mid-tango, sometimes when we were asleep. I rarely picked up, and eventually, when she realized her calls were being ignored, they stopped. On our first wedding anniversary, she tried to FaceTime us almost every hour. I didn't answer. Her wanting us to host her when I got back wasn't clueless. She knew what she was doing. Now that I have a new return date, she won't know when I'll be available. I don't plan on seeing her outside of maybe eating out together with my wife and the rest of the family. My wife will organize it and coordinate with my sisters about when mom is off work. That's the update for now. I might post more before I officially return, depending on how things go. I'm sure I'll have lots more to share when I get back. Now, on to story number 2. My wife got really mean after we had our baby and stopped working. She claimed she'd been cheating our whole marriage and said our daughter isn't mine. Her stepsister Hannah moved in to help out. I'm 35 and my wife is also 35. We've been married for 6 years. 7 months ago, my wife gave birth to our daughter, who I'll call Sai. Since then, my wife has become increasingly rude and refuses to do any housework, claiming she's still healing from childbirth, even though she regularly goes out with friends. 3 months ago, Hannah, my wife's 25-year-old stepsister, asked if she could temporarily move in because her apartment building was falling apart and she couldn't afford a new place right away. My wife was oddly eager to let her move in, despite always saying they didn't get along. They agreed that Hannah would help around the house in exchange for staying rent-free so she could save up for a deposit on a proper apartment. At first, things were fine. Hannah has ADHD and took a week to adjust to living with us, but then she started doing all the chores my wife had been neglecting. I told her she didn't have to do everything, but my wife said Hannah's ADHD made her want to clean, and Hannah backed her up. My wife constantly thanked Hannah, which seemed odd to me, but she brushed off my questions by saying it was normal. Since then, my wife has pushed all childcare and household chores onto Hannah and has been increasingly rude, yelling at her for any mistakes. I tried to step in when I was home, but my wife accused me of wanting to let Hannah be lazy because she was rich. We had a huge fight about her using that word and didn't speak for days. The breaking point came when I found out my wife had been making Hannah pay rent and buy baby supplies. I pay all the bills, and Hannah's money wasn't going towards the house. It was funding my wife's outings. My wife also made Hannah pay for food, while I gave my wife money for groceries, which she used to buy snacks for herself. We fought again, and my wife said Hannah could sleep on the street if she didn't like her rules. That's when I told my wife that it's my house since she doesn't pay any bills and does nothing but accuse Hannah of laziness. I even said I'd rather live with Hannah. Now my wife is sulking and refusing to talk to either of us. I'm starting to think I might have crossed a line. Just to clarify, I have zero romantic or sexual feelings for Hannah. Even if I did, she's a lesbian. And even if she wasn't, I wouldn't take advantage of her while she's dependent on me for housing. So please stop with the comments suggesting I marry Hannah. Edit: my wife was cleared for PPD, postpartum depression, a few months ago, but based on the comments, I will discuss having her screened again. Man, she really just made it all about herself, huh? No wonder you two never got along. Your wife seems totally okay with lying to your face and pretending she's not even married. Honestly, Shay, maybe it's time to give her what she wants. She's not being a decent spouse, neither staying home like she said she would, and she's constantly out with her friends. But hey, thank goodness for Hannah. She's been amazing taking care of Sadie and keeping the house in order. You really need to let your wife know how thrilled you are with this new setup. Now you've got yourself a live-in nanny and housekeeper, which means your wife can finally get a full-time job to pay Hannah and maybe even have some extra money for herself. I'm sure she'll love the idea. Just make sure to thank her for all this by saying she made it possible by lounging around while Hannah took over her responsibilities. Honestly, your wife is being a real jerk, projecting her own issues onto Hannah. And by the way, are you sure Hannah has ADHD and not OCD? Most of us with ADHD struggle with staying organized and cleaning up. I mean, I can go on a massive cleaning spree, like a germaphobe, but I'm usually pretty disorganized and let things get cluttered. Maybe others with ADHD can relate, or maybe some are more driven to clean because of it. Anyway, your wife is totally using Hannah, and it's not just postpartum depression. It feels like there's something more going on here. As for the update, sorry it took so long to share. I was trying to sort things out with my wife and Hannah. The talk with my wife didn't go well. I suggested she get checked again for PPD, but she flat out refused and wouldn't see a marriage counselor either. I pushed, saying if she didn't get checked, I'd assume her behavior was just her and that it would destroy our marriage. Maybe not the best way to handle it, but I didn't see any other option. Still, she wouldn't budge. After our chat, she started making messes on purpose and yelling at Hannah more. I didn't just sit back this time, I defended Hannah. After a week of this nonsense, I told my wife to move out. She became an absolute nightmare and went to stay with a friend, refusing to see Sadie as a way to punish me. She's been sending me messages saying she'll tell Sadie everything when she's old enough. Hannah feels like she shouldn't stay here without her sister, but I've assured her that's not the case. And for those who suspected my wife was cheating, you were right. A few days ago, I told her I wanted a divorce. She blew up and said she'd go for full custody because she's been cheating the whole time. We've been together and she's sure Sadie isn't mine. I can't even begin to describe how I feel or what's going to happen. I'm scared she's going to take my daughter away. I don't care if she's not biologically mine. Sadie is my daughter and I love her. I'm looking for a lawyer and hoping for advice on how to keep my daughter. I'm on her birth certificate, so I hope that means legally she's mine. Sorry if this update is a bit messy. I'm still dealing with everything. But on a positive note, Hannah has agreed to stay and help look after Sadie. We're working on an employment agreement so she'll be like a live-in nanny. That was Hannah's idea when I mentioned compensating her for all she's done. This will probably be my last update. Thanks for listening.